Yeah, there we go.
Just preparing. All right. So apparently as soon as I said that, it was live, right as I said live on here. So sorry, folks. We're just trying to get the Zoom stuff set up. So sorry for the little bit of a strange start. But now that YouTube has kind of like discontinued the YouTube Hangouts integration, we're moving to Zoom to stream our meetings instead. So welcome to the Express Technical Committee meeting of August 28th. Here is myself, Doug, and Wes. We have been doing we've been doing various work around our talking with the Node.js package management working group that Wes has been kind of working on with us. I know I think we'll probably start off a little bit with the what do you call it, status board, I think it's what you've been calling it. And also I know you've been playing around with the GitHub Actions. So I don't know if you have anything to talk about there as well. But
yeah, I do. Yep. Yeah, we didn't pull the agenda together because it's kind of been just overflow from the previous meeting. So I think I'm fine with that if that's good with you. Just pick up from where we left off on that.
Yeah, and I looked at the I had looked at the status board a little bit ago, and I think it's pretty neat. So I don't know if it's like, I don't know if like it's still being worked on or it's ready to launch kind of thing or whatnot. So
yeah, so I'll give an update. So it is, I would say, not ready to launch, but it is up to date, and I am actively working on I have some bug fixes. So there's a couple of broken links still. So I presented. I'll take a step back. I presented it also to the package maintenance working group earlier this week. They said they like the idea so that they can start sending people our way. So they've got a list of people who sort of volunteered and said, hey, I want to help out. Where can I help? Those people, so my hope is this weekend leading up to, and then this weekend I'll fix the last of the bugs, get a couple of, it's got the issues listed. The ordering is maybe not optimal because the top priority tag is on the bottom of the list and the discussions is in the top, but I don't know if we want to send people to, I feel like it's kind of more important to send people to discussions and help wanted, because that's really where the people are going to make a lot of progress looking at the Express 5.0 or TypeScript type really like issues. At first, I feel like they're going to get a lot more value out of like looking at the discussions and helping us maybe close some of them out, or help the users who need help.
Yep, I think that does make sense, because thinking about that, right? Certainly help wanted seems like it should probably be, if you're thinking about where people should start, to me, help wanted is exactly like, it's literally the project. Someone in that project has labeled it asking for help. So I mean, that makes sense to be near the top for sure. Because, so for example, like even a top prior, even like, because you can have many tags at once. So you can tag something, but both top priority and help wanted. So
and as it stands, the way this tooling works, it would pull into both lists.
Yep. Which makes total sense. I like, that it shows kind of like a little bit of like which repo it is and stuff like that. So I liked how it's going, and I really did like the little top contributors on the side. And I just assume it's just what are the authors from across all the repos, because we've talked about that in the past. When we've talked about things like how do we get people to be, I forget how long ago it was now, but I think you probably remember where it was like we were talking about like, well, there's people who I think would rather contribute to the main Express repo because I think
Yeah.
their name will be there versus like, contributing to these other ones. And, this kind of like gives them a place that like, is kind of like on the Express site of like, oh, there's my name up there. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
time bound. I mean, it'd be a gigantic list
So
otherwise.
so the yeah, it is. It's very funny when I actually removed. So I'll tell you what's actually being included here. So it's comments, issues, or PRs opened, and commits is basically what it is. Um,
So that was because
so
that's when I was going to ask if it included more than just commits, but that's cool because that's kind of like what I was thinking anyways, because, we talked about that before, right? Contributing is more than just, do you have a commit landing?
yep.
Because that is a form of contribution, but it's not the only form.
Yep. So I have some ideas about how we could structure this. Again, totally, this is like first pass at the idea. So this is as raw as it gets. I just took every single event from the GitHub API and just like added them up, right?
Yep.
But I think there's some value in saying like, well, so there is a little more value in a commit landing. So
Sure.
like maybe
Yeah.
that should be 2 points, right? I don't know. I feel like there could be some way we say like here's the raw number, but then here's like the value of those commits. Because at this point, like if you look here, like the third most and this I'm guessing is comments, because if you look in this person, so this is U54F. Trying to find I'm just trying to find so it's also it's 90 days of commits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a little bit more than that on the comments. It might be, I think it's if you've opened issues, that's actually the entire history of open issues, but it only includes comments from the last 90 days. Or again, it's a work in progress. So I think we have a lot of improvements. But the third most person, I can't even figure out what they contributed to. Like if I go to their page, it's like I don't see any of our projects on there. It must be
Right. And of course it could be comments because like you said, like they don't usually show up.
Yeah, like it most likely is a comment somewhere would be my guess.
Yeah. And like I found one and they opened up an issue in body parser
There you go.
a while back, May 31st. I mean, I'm sure that's
Yeah.
probably at least something.
Yeah, but eight comments could be in that thread, right? So like, is the value of 8 comments in a thread reporting an issue that's actually kind of like maybe not even a real Express issue? Like, probably shouldn't land you on this board. If we're trying to figure out how to incentivize good contributions, a strict count of comments is not really all that valuable, I don't think.
Right. So actually, and while you're talking about that whole weighted thing, what we could do is like over time, like instead of it saying like X number of contributions, because of course I think like that certainly makes people wonder what is the specific contributions. Like especially if there's a weighted system, then like we could probably like sort it and just show like a bar that doesn't actually show a number on it or something like that, because that would at least
Yeah. No, I
because
think that's a
like
great
landing
idea.
the commit was like 2 points, and like making a comment like to like being the first comment say on an issue, obviously that has other issues, but we can address those that come up. The idea there would be like the first comment to an issue is probably they're helping triage it, because that's usually what the first comment is to an issue.
Yep.
Maybe that's like 1.5 or just 1, and a general comment is half or something, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like
no, I think that makes perfect sense. Yep.
so and then yeah, and I'm just obviously I'm just thinking just out loud here in general, but yeah, but otherwise in general, like it'll be awesome to have this kind of thing. And I was just actually thinking about how we could make it almost like look like part of the website at some point, because I know like you used like the Express kind of like the Express website theming. It's of course. So what is kind of nice, though I still don't have access to it, is that Express.js.com is pointed to a Cloudflare account.
Yeah.
So if we eventually can get around to that, like Cloudflare would allow us to basically move this, and the Express website under the same domain, just different paths. So then, expressjs.com, / like, I don't know, help, or I don't know, something. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yep.
spitballing
Getting
here. You
started,
go to
you know,
like,
or contribute or something.
right. And so it would still be this underlying page behind it, but then that way it can even, I feel like that the reason I was thinking about that was mainly for these contributors. You know, as we list these people
Mhm.
for contributions, it will just seem even more like, you know, official, I guess you could say.
I
So I think it would help
completely agree.
classify
But I
people.
also, yeah, like, and some things too, like just showing the avatar, like would be a simple addition that would just make it look nicer and have that visual reference for the person who's like, look, I got on the board, and it's like their picture, you know.
Right. Yep.
Um, I
But
think
yeah,
there's a
so
lot of value in that for the incentivizing um, piece. So yeah, so all of this, by the way, so you can also go to that repo if you have ideas and you want to take a look at the code. It should be pretty easy to start adding that kind of
yep.
logic, and then it is very much a work in progress. So if we wanted to do that, so I built it in such a way, and I don't know if you've looked at the repo on the Express org, but it really just wraps. So what you do is you just install the package, and then you call it with your config, and your config is the thing that tells it which project to index. Um, and so we could so right now I call them indices, but it's basically like when I build all the data, I make a bunch of static JSON files that power the data on the site.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not building a static page, it's building a single page app with a bunch of data files.
I gotcha.
Right. And then it just fetches the data files as you move around the page. By the way, it's also using the router on the front end in this app. So that's that project I worked on a long time ago that I still use, but hasn't necessarily caught on.
Right. What is it called? Like Night Hawk or something like that?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So so anyway, that's just sort of going off in the weeds. But the idea basically is we could start setting up our own specific Express indices that maybe make more sense for us. And then we could put that in the config. And right now it's not config driven, but like we could make that change in the status board package so that we could start trying out, you know, different things that we can commit that don't necessarily need to be in that package. It's just right now it's kind of hard coded in there. So
Right.
if you want to do that, I'm also, so I presented it to the package maintenance working group, and I have a few people who expressed interest. One person from NPM said they might be interested in using it, and then one person from the JS Foundation said they might be interested in using it. So if we get these sort of big names involved, I think this could make a lot of progress really fast.
Yeah, because like, you know, I know it helps us for sure because we have like a lot of repos, but I mean, um, I think I mean, theoretically, because really, like just because you can have a bunch of repos on there, it doesn't negate all the rest of it. So, I mean, it can help
Mhm.
really, I feel like even a project that only has one repo, um, you know,
Yep.
versus the org.
Yeah, and I think the aggregation point is what's nice here, right? Is that like, because all the rest of this is available on GitHub, right? You search, you find the issues with the tags, right? But like finding it all in a way like this, where it's like the top 3 help wanted, the top 3 discuss the meetings, right? Like is like puts it in front of all of it in front of you at once, which is just not very easy to do on GitHub itself, you know. And also the top contributors is like buried, you know.
Right. But like I said, also like it could also help people like just if they want to like make this more front and center in their web page more than instead of like just saying kick off to GitHub.
Right.
It can certainly help there. I know that like, you know, for example, like I know Pug.js, like that project used to have a bunch of repos, and then it's a while back, you know, it was just now one mono repo. So it's still a bunch of different packages,
Mm-hmm.
but just in one repo doing the like the
So
mono repo style.
So one thing I think one of the reasons why people have chosen that approach is because there wasn't good tooling around managing a project distributed across multiple repos. I don't think they get a ton of gain out of the structure of the code in that sense. I think there's actually sacrifices you make, but I think the orchestration of like the project is easier. And this tool, this status word page, is like specifically because I don't think Express would ever want to go a mono repo. Um, and I don't think it's even the best approach. I think it's actually a worse approach for some organizational gains. You know, and the trade-off is that the code, like sometimes you have these weird problems with I have a tag that's a version, but the version tag is like for this one package, but there's another package that's at a different version. It's like, so a bunch of weird stuff like that. And issues filing all being under one, like, overarching org. If you had 50 packages in one repo, like, or figuring out which issues belong to which package is very difficult.
Right. And I mean, GitHub even like, so even then, if you wanted to have it such that you could, if one wanted to say, well, I want one place for users to submit issues, you can actually do that with GitHub these days, because you can move issues between repos in your org.
True. Mm-hmm.
So like theoretically, if that was a reason, right, you could have like, basically the issue creation repo almost. And then as they're triaged, they can just be moved over if that was a desire, of course. I'm just not saying we would do that, but maybe we would do that. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think either way. Either way, I think it's helpful just to have it all centralized. So I'm glad you are on board with that and see the promise. And if you want to contribute, great. Otherwise, I'll be working on it probably the next couple of weeks at least with little things. I'm going to reach out to, because I've also mentioned I'm like, I don't know, I'm not a designer. So there's a bunch of user experience design stuff that I think should just be better. So I'd love to, if anybody knows, anybody who sees this video and wants to reach out, who has some people who want to contribute like open source design work, I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm not a designer, but I mean, I could certainly usually like get things to look fine. Like even right now, your thing looks fine.
Yeah.
But of course,
it's not totally broken, but it's like gray. Like I chose gray and blue. Like that's the the least controversial design decision I could possibly make.
But yeah, I like it a lot. I see that like if you click on like the help wanted on the main page, it goes to issues help wanted, but doesn't actually load yet.
Yeah,
but sure
that's just a bug. I just need to. I have to fix that. And I think if you go to the top, if you click just top issues, it actually goes to a list where all of the issues are present.
Yep.
But then it's not every single link. There's a broken link on this page somewhere. One type of these links is broken. I have to find that. But yeah, there's a bunch of little issues. The fixes for them all are pretty simple. Like, I don't know if you look at the top contributors, it's sorted by number except for this first person because they have a name that is a number. And so the way I'm building the list is I have an object with the name. So I need to just because JavaScript sorts the keys when they're strings as the order you put them on the object.
Oh,
but when you add a number as a key to an object, it plops it first. So when I do object.entries, it puts it first. And it's just stuff like that. It's like little bugs, easy to fix. I wanted to get the main thing out there to see if people thought the idea was good before I spent a lot of time, really like nitpicking the implementation. So
I was wondering why that number one was at the top, but yeah. So I remember that was a V8 specific quirk. I don't remember if they've now encoded that into the spec or not, but yeah, it's that when you insert a key as a number, it basically inserts it into the array, like kind of like arrayness area or something like that. And whenever you iterate over an object, it does its array slots first, and then it's like key slots or whatever.
Yep.
But yes, it is a strange quirk.
Yeah, I looked at that and I went, yeah, I'm not going to fix that bug tonight. I just pushed the commit. I was like, whatever. So.
But yeah, so other than this kind of stuff, I know I don't really have too much because I was kind of like out for a little bit. Though I am planning to try to like chew through a bunch of stuff in our repos, including probably like get a patch, Express, 417 like .2 out, just because I know there's been some dependency updates in the meantime.
Yep.
So just to like, freshen those up there. And then of course then I'll get that merged into the 5 branch, and then we'll get, the path to regex update merged into and get that stuff all out in like a 5 beta and get like and and body parser. So I want to get a Express 5.0 beta 1, the first beta out, and that will have your change from the path to regex stuff, which will be the beta of router. There's a 5.0 branch that's on body parser, or not a 5.0 branch, sorry, 2.0 branch has been waiting to go in 5.0. So I'll get that refreshed up, get a 5.0 like beta of that as well. And so we'll basically, the first beta we'll get all of that kind of like in there as our accumulation of the next step for that.
Awesome.
So I'm going to, I basically am off work for the next couple of weeks. So that's why I'm basically just going to be doing this kind of full time there. So.
Excellent. I mean, not excellent since it's probably not a great reason to be off work, but you get some extra time.
Right. But, it is what it is. So I will, but yeah, so I'll have a bunch of time to probably just chew through all of that. And I'm going to try to especially like as we're trying to do GitHub actions and stuff like that, I'm going to also try to write down some thoughts too around potential ways, what exactly, goes into stuff like this. So then we got a concrete, here's what stuff is being done. So then we can think about what parts of this can be automated or at least semi-automated.
So can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's been a little progress there as well.
Yep.
Let me find the link here really quick.
And so I saw the one, what is it? Edgar is his name. Had opened up a issue on discussions too about automation around closing issues.
Yes. So he went through and was looking through that discuss tag and was trying to find ones that hadn't had a lot of activity and saying hey, can you close this? Which is great and very helpful, super helpful. But I think his idea of let's just get, because there's a bot for that. So I think his idea was let's just install that bot. Can we, get that going? Which I think is I think fairly uncontroversial, right?
Yep. No. So the two bots I feel are really probably easy ones are of course GitHub Actions. If we can do that there, I think it's more flexible. But that one thing I showed you, I forget what it was called, but so they have what they call StaleBot. Yep. So that's the close stale issues. So of course, I think StaleBot has this config. Well, we should probably do it too, where the bot will first post, "Hey, I think this is stale. I'm going to close it soon if there's no more activity." Versus it just suddenly being closed. And then it will come back and close it if there isn't anything since then. And the bot considers anything that happens after that activity. So even if someone changes labels, it'll count that as activity. Then the other bot I really want to kind of see, which I feel is uncontroversial, but I know you probably see it all the time if you're subscribed to some of these repos, but it's always been an issue on our repos, is that to have it automatically lock things that have been closed for a long time.
So is there a bot that does that?
I believe I've seen it in that same system. I mean, I'm sure GitHub Actions can do it, but
so GitHub Actions can definitely do it. So I linked in the last week's issue a labeler action. So I was thinking I would fork that. That was once I finished the status board, that was going to be my next thing, and then have that do the labeling stuff that we were talking about, which is sort of what it has there is a little bit more straightforward. I think ours would be more bespoke to what we want, which is that issues when certain people comment, people who we've whitelisted comment, it can add them, that part of it that we talked about, I think last week or the week before. But we could also do this in that same bot. So maybe make a action, just a generic action that does 5 or 6 different activities. And one could be locking, because it could definitely do that. It can, there's a toolkit for doing just general GitHub API things. And it does the whole, it gives you a token that you can use to do it. And you don't have to, it's pretty easy.
Cool. Yeah. I found a bot. It's not from the ProBot people, but just called Lock.
The one nice thing about the actions versus the bot is that the bot needs a service running.
Right.
The action just is in the repo. It's just a file in the YAML file in the GitHub
Yeah,
repo.
GitHub runs it, right?
Yep.
It's definitely nicer. Because for one, GitHub's the one running it, right? So theoretically, these bot services, right? You're giving access to this third party
Absolutely.
service that can do stuff, which
it might be limited access, right? Because usually it's like the token can only like read comments or something, and it doesn't need commit access, right?
But yeah. And so, yeah, this bot has like the standard thing. See, it's like number of days of inactivity before a closed issue or pull request is locked. So yeah, like I'd probably something similar to that. So if it's like, probably if something's like just closed for like, probably like months and months, it'll just lock it or something. Because as you see, like typically a lot of times, like there's two reasons I want to go through and lock old issues. It's just hard to do it by hand. Is that one, the problem is sometimes they show up in like search results for like Google, right? So sometimes people go in there and they'll post in there. Like I think one just happened recently where it's like oh hey, what the heck? Has this been solved yet? But it's like this was like when like Express 2 was still out.
Yeah, I think the issue was opened in 2012. Yeah. Or something. It was very
yeah. And like I get it, it can be confusing. So that's actually why there's like the 3x and 4x labels to use sometimes. It's hard to know when to use them exactly, but still.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that would help. In fact, it'd be actually cool, though, if we use a GitHub action, we can do it. Is that in my mind, I always thought too, if like when it locks the issue, it could put like a generic message, like, at the bottom of an issue, for example, on like a pull request, it could be like, by the way, if you think that you're seeing this issue still or anything similar to it, open a new issue and you can always link to this. But, here's how you open a new issue kind of thing at the bottom.
This is exactly the kind of thing where, I mean, like we could just have our own custom little Express bot, and we can start building out those kind of interactions without having to think about, is this generic? Because like most of the bots right now are just pretty generic. It's like, we think a lot of people have this issue, and it's like, well, no, we want something that's like specific to what we're doing, which is, not everybody's going to want the same handling of old, and maybe they do, and then they just fork it, or or we work on making it more generic later. But I think to start, I think we should just get some really concrete,
right? Which is really nice about GitHub Actions, because, I mean, kind of like to your point, almost like some of these already exist, like the lockbot, right? And so like the lockbot already exists, but like you'd have to, it either works as is for what you need it for, or it doesn't yet. And you have to get that, it's a whole process to get that updated, because it's, it's not like it can't, but GitHub Actions, in contrast, you can basically just edit it yourself, basically, because we're already coders as it is. So it makes it easy for us to do versus like, like relying on it just because we're already coders.
Right. Yeah. I think the bot approach, and that is really great for the non, the organization managers and the stuff that it's not, maybe even for the repos where it's not as actively engineering efforts, but for what we're doing, to me, it makes the most sense to just have a CI step, like in the repo, in the code, commit and push the, configuration as code, I think is not a bad thing.
But cool. But yeah, so I saw that issue open. So I think like we could probably just, end up with probably like a few of those like really simple ones concretely done there. So we can start getting some of those figured out, because those I think are both valuable. The stale bot and a locking bot. I'm trying to think of anything off the top of my head, if there'd be any other very simplistic bot that would be immediately valuable. I know we talked about like potentially figuring out if it was like marking it to be triaged and doing that. Though,
so that's pretty straightforward. If I fork it. What was that? Say that again.
I was going to say to unmark it as triaged, I think is a little less straightforward. But
I'm not sure. So I think, let me pull up. I had it. I had the link
okay.
open. So I actually, we don't need to go too far into that detail, but I think it's pretty easy. I posted a
Okay,
link to
cool.
the thing, and it's just a JavaScript file, and it's got the GitHub API toolkit in it, so you can make any request you want. So like we could look at it and say, oh, on comment events, run the action, and then we'd have a little switch statement that just says, okay, for comment events, what we do is we look at the author of the comment, and if the body of the comment has the text, you know, triaged, or like we could like make it more specific so that it's not just picking up random comments that might randomly say triaged, but and is in this list of GitHub usernames, then remove the label, right? And that would mean that we could just say at the end of it, hashtag triaged or something, or
Right.
at expressbot/triaged, something complicated enough that it's not going to be something natural language is going to have trouble with, but like whatever, kind of like closes in GitHub commits, right?
Right. Well, even
Yep.
that, like, yeah, and that's pretty natural. I've seen lots of repos. For example, I think like the Kubernetes repos, I've seen a lot where like they have like those bots set up where they put like slash. It's basically like, it
Yeah.
looks like, standard like chat actions. And that's how they like command their bot to mark it or do whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I
We
think
could
that'd
do
be
that
great.
too. Something
So,
like that.
so if we're good with this, then how about this? I'll fork the label bot to the Express org. I'll call it like Express bot or something. Like I'm maybe not fork, but I'll clone and kind of clean up and then push, because also it's written in TypeScript, so I'll have to I have to. I don't have to, but I would prefer to write it in plain JavaScript.
Yeah, and this is for GitHub Actions, right? That it
Yeah.
needs.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Just checking.
Yeah. So what it is, if you can tell, because there's the old version of GitHub Actions, and those don't have. So the key thing is the repo has action.yaml in the root. That's the like indicator that it's the new GitHub Actions format. So also, if you check out, I have one. So I also have one that I just published. It's a Bash one. So it's not even using JavaScript. It's just a Bash script in a Docker container that's used to build GitHub pages things. So it actually like does some magic, like it's not magic, but it does an orphan branch. So like if you were setting up a new project, you could just have the action, and then it would run a command that you want to build a GitHub pages. It was like really easy to set up, and it's just this action.yaml. So we could, also have other things, like if we wanted to do certain types of testing, for some, yeah, I guess, so if we want to do something like spin up a service like that had some specific, I guess we do that with just, maybe that doesn't apply to all that. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off topic. We have flexibility. We could do a Docker container and do basically anything we want inside the Docker container if we need to. Like you could even have a database and, do complicated things.
Yep. But yeah, that sounds cool though. I didn't realize it. We talked about it as code. I didn't realize it was a separate repo. I don't really care. I was just.
Oh, it doesn't have to be either. It could be in the repo itself. My thought was just we would have a shared one that we'd put on all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
But
if
cool.
we're good with that, I'll fork the labeler one. I'll strip out the stuff that we're not going to use, and then we can have that as a fresh slate. I'll get it maybe running on the discussions repo, and then we can get whatever features we want implemented from there, and then enable it on the other ones once we're all settled. So I could probably do that weekend, I think. And I won't do too much work on it. I'll just get sort of the scaffold in place, and then we can add features sort of iteratively.
Sounds good.
Cool. So let's see. I'm trying to think if there was anything else on that topic from the previous meeting we just had. Are we going to use actions? Answers like, yeah, let's explore it. And then there was the labeling. Oh, one question I had on that. So I labeled 2 issues as top priority.
Yep.
Do we have other ones that we should go and label? I don't know if we want to put some that are on like some of the other repositories would maybe be good to tag.
Yeah, so I know the two that I saw you put was the 5.0 and the HV2. I saw that like in the status board repo, it's not actually yet tracking every single one of our repos, just because.
Okay, it should be.
Oh, I saw some commented out, so I thought maybe it wasn't. So.
Okay. Well, that's so. I also ran into what I think is a improperly handled timeout on GitHub Actions. So if the job running takes more than about 10 minutes, I'm not sure if that's even the limit, but that's where if I run it locally, it takes about 10 minutes. So I'm assuming that somewhere around there, it just never finishes and doesn't like move on. So I commented some out. So I do a partial index. So I actually pushed with one set. And because the level DB is actually committed to the repository, you can do like, I just did multiple builds to get the full index built because it would time out if I tried to do everything at once.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But
well, cool.
So I have an issue with them open already to try to figure out if that's a real bug or just something I was doing wrong or what.
But yeah, I do have a couple that I might add the top priority on too in like Pillar.js org.
So if we wanted to, because the build fails, that's why I haven't merged it yet. Because if I merge it, it'll start running every 2 hours. And with the timeout, that means that it'll error every 2 hours and send us an email, which is just, I don't know.
I see.
Not as much noise as when I was publishing the packages on accident, but certainly 2 hours an email every 2 hours when we know it's going to fail is not very productive. So it's unmerged, but we can push to it and whenever we want, and that'll trigger a build.
Right.
And then if we could limit the list to the ones we care most about for now until we get this timeout bug fixed, then I would feel comfortable merging it, and we could start at least those important ones being built every 2 hours, so it's sort of up to date.
Yeah, and and probably like part of the timeout too is probably just the amount of work it's probably doing as well. So we could probably like stare at it some more or whatever and figure out.
Yeah, I didn't do like any optimizations for that.
Exactly.
Like it's in serial. It's not in parallel. We could do batches where we run like all the for each project has probably, depending on how many activities on the repo, probably anywhere from 10 to 50 HTTP requests it makes. So if we did like all of those 10 to 50 in parallel, then it would be like probably a lot faster.
Right. And my point wasn't for criticism. It was more like just to say, like, I'm sure there are low-hanging fruit that we look at and probably get that addressed as we continue going on. But as you said, limiting the repos is a good interim solution for now until we get that set up. So that sounds good to me. Yeah. I'll take a look at also about the list of the repos too to see if I have any thoughts on there about if we don't really care about this one but care more about this other one, then we can like just alt change which ones are running for now. So
yeah, that'd be great. Yep.
But cool. Alrighty.
So I think that's basically all of those issues. We got labeler, we got the actions, and we got the status board. So from last week or 2 weeks ago, the only other one is that rec prototype separate repo thing, I think. So do we want to move on to that?
So because of it, it's not really easy for me to talk too much, and
you have lots of opinions
for a while. So I might not really have it in me too much to at least for me to talk too much more. So it's kind of up to you if you want to just talk about it or.
Yeah, I can talk about it, and then maybe we could table the discussion of whether or not we think we want to move forward on it for later, but at least I'll have given my little 2 cents here.
All right, cool.
So yeah, okay. So a while back, around when I started at Netflix, I was like, well, Netflix is using Restify, like let me explore why and what they have and all that stuff. So I talked to some of the maintainers there, and had some, old comments on like, well, this is a thing we had to do and we were unsure and how to do it with Express. So we have this Restify thing that we built. And a lot of it was really just, at the time, there wasn't really a good path for the parts that they wanted to share to be shared and the parts that they didn't to, let them build out customly or do a mix and match. So we've gotten a lot better on that since then with Pillar.js and JS But one of the things that kept on coming up was the sugar methods on rec and res. Basically, so there was a tweet that one person said that was like, hey, I found another use case of Node Core not having a good rec res interface. It should be, nicer. And then I'm like, well, yeah, like, so what should it should be like Express, right? And it's like, well, yeah, that's what everybody's doing, is basically writing shims that are like Express's rec res for their own ecosystem. So I think the that particular one was maybe like Microsoft, I think, had a yeah, where's the, I thought I kind of linked one of the tweets or something, because it was like basically Microsoft had like something in their ecosystem, like a wrapper, so that people could run like cloud functions with recres as if it was an Express recres, which means basically they must have went and re-implemented the whole thing, right? Like there's no real other way to do it without like wrapping it up. So
Yeah, you're talking about like, yeah, Google Cloud Functions, I think, is one I've seen like that.
maybe it was that, yeah.
And it says in their docs that it is Express version whatever, but I know it's not. So I have to connect it.
So even worse, right? So that's actually even worse.
Because I've seen a couple bugs that people have mentioned somewhere else. And so like, yeah, so I mean, I get it. What they're trying to really state is that it's compatible with that version of Express, but yes. And it was because they probably, what they're doing under the hood is they're not getting an actual HTTP request to where the cloud function is running. So they're basically getting some kind of probably intermediate data representation and then like inflating it to a fake request and then getting what they said for the response and then sending it back over that. That's most likely what's happening and why they bothered. But
yeah, which I think makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, it leads to all those weird problems, like, if they have a bug and it's not quite right, or if we change the API, they have to maintain the compatibility layer. And if there's 10 compatibility layers, and I know for sure that Fastify and Restify both have some concept of an Express compatibility, and it's not the same, and it's also not complete. So my thought with doing this was that we could start moving in the direction of providing some of these really core pieces as pluggable, modules. So, that a server like Fastify could, in their layer, instead of doing their fake version, just install our version, pass the raw rec to it, get out an Express style, it's not an Express style, like literally an Express sugared rec and res, and then pass that to their compatibility layers. So that was sort of the idea here. And then there was like sort of all these offshoot conversations that I had that sort of led to like, well, on a side benefit, if you did that, it would give us the ability to try out ideas and then think about moving them into Node Core, which we haven't done a lot of efforts all the time on. But it would be an easier way if it was sort of segmented off from Express proper. And then it would also give us that start of the place where we would do the HTTP 2 and then 3 wrappers, right? Because we have to do that at some point anyway. So this would be sort of a way to isolate that work, and in a way that would not only isolate it, but would also let the compatibility layers that have been written be updated without a ton of work, because we would then maintain the canonical implementation. And then, yeah, I feel like there were some other pros, but basically those are the big ones, I think. So those, to me, were the reason why I started this. And this is mostly just a proof of like, look, it's actually not that hard to pull it out. And then we could discuss whether or not we think there's any value in doing it, maintaining it, all the other problems that pulling it out would have. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I definitely have like a bunch of thoughts directly or just around that kind of a thing about there. I think I shared some of them a little bit with like, about the HTTP2 stuff as well. I think that I know my mouth is already starting to kind of hurt a little bit, but I'll probably leave this as my last thing. It's not directly about this, but it is related to it. And this kind of a thing or similar thing will help in this regard. Is that definitely one of the things I see in my mind as a picture is like some way, to have it where you get like our kind of like layer where, you get the request and response kind of sugar stuff, but like have it so it's not so tied to the Node.js HTTP thing. So as example of like, one of the examples is HTTP2, which that's usually the first example because people say they want it, but like the even though they have a compatibility mode, essentially, it's not really the compatibility mode is just really just trying to make some of the things there, but it doesn't really hide it, which means that, and what I mean by that is like if you were to write a middleware and publish it, it could easily use something that's HTTP2 only, even though it's in HTTP2 compat mode. Therefore, it doesn't work with it. So then it becomes really confusing of whether or not the thing will actually work, if you're using a 1 server or 2 server, or even worse, if you have that setting on where it says like allow HTTP1 requests to true. So then like basically it almost looks like Chrome, which keeps doing, say, HTTP2 to you, it's all working until like you get this random browser who gets to you and then it crashes because you didn't implement a bunch of if statements to say, well, if it's 1, do this, otherwise do this kind of thing. When I feel like really it should actually be the same. Like, and you could say, well, what about push promises? Well, I mean, that doesn't have to, there's all kinds of things about that. But if you think about it, a push promise can be rejected. So like, usually that's the main argument here. We can literally have a push promise API available in 1, just like it would be in 2. But then what it would do is it obviously won't push it, and then it will give whatever the signal is that basically is what would happen if the browser rejected your push promise, because that's basically what just happened. So, there's all kinds of those capabilities, even things like the whole problem, sure, that probably like the Google Cloud Functions has and why they can't use it. To even stuff like having a way where, people who really want to be able to mock it can like truly mock it with, and it ends up using all of our sugar still, not like just a reinvented mock sugar, and having like, I don't know if this still even, if there's people who even care about this anymore, but like just is another example of an interfacing protocol is like say fast CGI, right? I don't know. What if you want your node server still has to interface with some higher level service that only talks fast CGI? So then you can still have the full exact Express, but just it talks fast CGI over the wire instead, whatever. So
yeah, no, I think that's like I think that is the exact approach that would be the most flexible moving forward and would solve a lot of these problems. Because also I think it'd be interesting to think about like gRPC, or like other things that we're just not considering at all today. But we need a place to do that safely. And I still think that moving it out has enough benefit that, and because then we could spin off a 2.0 of it without even doing the 2.0 in Express if we wanted. We maybe don't merge to master, but we publish it and we say, hey, look, Google Cloud, does this solve your problem? Right? Maybe not publish a 2.0 and say that, but publish a beta 2.0. Like we would have a place where we could send them and see, and again, and this would also apply to like the Restify people and the Fastify people and say, look, we spun this out. We want to get more tightly collaborative with you, not coupled, but collaborative, right? So like when you find a bug or have a performance improvement that gets to the most users possible, which means it, because it's Express, or whatever. And today we're just not doing that in most cases, right? Like we are a bit with Koa, but like definitely not on the rec res sugar stuff.
Right.
Um,
But yeah. And so, like I said, what I was describing was like I would say a higher level vision, like, obviously not directly feedback to your thing, but like your thing, how I think your, like this thing we're talking about fits into that vision in a way. So, and that's where I think, like, to me, like the goal, like it definitely fits in with the goal. And plus, like you said, like, I know we've talked about it before, but like, with the whole thing with like pillar and stuff like that, I would like to see one day, eventually we'll get there as we continue to split things off, but it's like the actual Express package is really just a configuration
mm-hmm.
of a bunch of pillar packages in a specific way that makes, Express itself, and then people can pick and do whatever if they feel like that. I know you mentioned, like, for example, like Fastify. So they have a Express compatibility layer. It doesn't actually add any of the rec res sugar functions at all. It's just even notes that in there. It's more of like the middleware signature, which itself is just literally rec res next. So that's basically all they're doing right now. And I think that, like, obviously, like, I think that people would benefit, like, to have a way to do it. So just like, I don't know where I was going with that, but still, like, even as simple as like potentially having, like, one of my other thoughts, which I'm not really sure how to really pull off just yet, but like another thought I had was like, say like just an example of Express 4 versus like what we have right now for 5. So, we've deprecated and then are removing like some of the more like ambiguous or confusing, sugars, and splitting them out. Like examples of that are like, rather than send, take like a weird polymorphic of a bunch of different like types, split out. So it's more predictable of what exactly you're going to get out. That what if like a middleware or something could, says like, well, I know Express 4, but then when you were to mount that in 5 for, say, then it would just still almost like get the 4 API magically or something. I don't know.
No, I think that's a great use case for that. Because also one of the things that we've been, a first principle or whatever you might say is like backward compatibility, right? But if we had a layer, it would mean we could iterate the other stuff more quickly,
right,
while maintaining backward compatibility. I think that would be awesome.
Exactly. Because like, and that's the main reason I see that is because even then between 4 and 5, not too big of a difference. But if we start changing like some more fundamental things, like having a good way, like having at some point some way to like figure that out and like just make things so they, quote, just work. Obviously there'll be some kind of, limitations in there which we would document, but still, like, that way, someone can, because the biggest problem that you always get, I'm sure, it happens all over the place, but still, like, if say Express 6 comes out and you have to like change, say it like gets rid of next, because we come up with a more expressive way to do all the stuff you need to do, right? I mean, what is the ask there? I mean, it's basically like we'll rewrite tons of things. I mean, it might be a, quote, simple change, and maybe someone who has their entire like Express app custom made can pull that off. But then when you start talking about like all of the stuff out on NPM that they're probably using, it becomes a whole nother thing. Like there'll probably be hordes of people who will like, make pull requests or make issues to, update it. Different authors might say if there's a way to have it work on both. Some authors might push out an update that works on both. Some might only have it work on 6. People will be confused about what works where, and I'm sure they'll come to us and we can help answer it too. But still, like,
Right.
it'd certainly be cool if they could just continue to work, maybe not in the most featureful way yet because of that, but still, like, to your point mainly, so it can help like increase the ease of which, we can iterate towards like, more functional APIs versus like continuing to focus on how it looked in the past. Like a kind of good example of that though not super specific to this, but still it's somewhat related, would be like the whole, the error handling mechanism. I know we've talked about that a bunch too,
Yes. Yeah, I have an open PR for that.
Right. And so like getting that to be, not reliant on things like the arity, I think is would be super awesome. I mean, and there are other things where even the arity, which is kind of like pretty expressive, as we talked about how you can just slap it everywhere, it still has its limitations. A good example is like, what if you have some kind of middleware that you want to always run with every request, even if an error had occurred? So as in like you want to have maybe you want to have a middleware that, someone can just use it and it will run both on errors and non-errors, but like it's basically the only way to do it today is you have to have two exports and they have to use both of them.
Yep.
I mean, technically, if they're using Express proper, you can have one export that's an array, a bare array, and then they can just use that. But still, like, it's
But even that is not like, we don't have like examples that are like, if you want to do this, here's how to do it.
And that's a whole.
Even that is sort of buried. Like most users that I talk to don't know that that's a thing they can do. So
yeah, definitely.
Even experts, like people have been using Express for years, they don't know. I'm like, yeah, you can do that, and they're like, oh, cool. So
yeah, and that's a whole nother thing that we'll probably have to talk about at some point too. Talking about just things in general is like, I think like we have I think a pretty good site with a lot of documentation on there, but our biggest piece of lacking is just like kind of like how to do XYZ. Like we had like a little thing on writing middlewares, but it doesn't really like describe like how to author middlewares and stuff like that. I mean, I've even had people come in various forums and like, and you've probably seen it too, about like, well, what's the best way to do X, Y, or Z kind of thing. And even if there isn't a right answer, I'm sure, we do have answers, which we can still write down. So like either we can have this is the recommended way, or we can have like, these are the two main methods to do it. But it kind of like gives people a place to go figure it out. Because, some people will be able to figure out, some won't. A lot of that comes, which we're thankful for, comes from just, you can search on Google and you get lots of different sites and Stack Overflows that already have the answers there. But, sometimes they end up like getting lost to time, so they'll be no longer relevant for other things, or, they'll be too specific to whatever the person's question was, for example, or something. But anyways, that was
I think that's a great point. And this is the kind of thing where I think getting more people feeling like they're a part of the project might be really valuable, because, I don't know about you, but like I've tried to write some posts like that, and I just never, like, even I have a couple PRs, I think, to the docs site that that's like the lowest on my list of things I want to do on the weekend, like writing the blog post or whatever. But there's a lot of people who are the total opposite, right? Like they would just love to sign up to be like, you give me a topic and I will write your blog posts for you. Like there were definitely people who would do that if we had specific requests,
Yep. Yeah. And I can write, but like I'm still not a super strong writer, for example. So sometimes can just sit there at like a blank page and be like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So, and like those are really awesome contributions. I think that there's a lot of people can make, and I think like part of even that is like figuring out how do we, relate to that. I think, having things like that, starting to like figure out how to express like the contributions more front and center across everything can help with that too, because I mean they're really big contributors. People who can contribute whole sections of documentation is awesome.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Probably like, at least just as valuable as writing code itself. So I think, but
yeah, could be more valuable. It depends on the the topic and the quality, but
right.
yeah. So, oh hey, well, so are we? I think we're probably pretty much done. I didn't want to cut it off, but
probably for the most part. I'll schedule one on the 11th.
Okay.
For the next one.
So to that point, we are on the OpenJS Foundation's calendar now. So we have this Zoom account registered for perpetuity, I guess. They also, Jory posted in the other, I think it was last week's, I brought up the Slack thing. They have a Slack that they could make us some channels in. It might be a better place since the one that I linked before is actually just some Node contributor is the one who manages it, but the OpenJS one is more official.
Gotcha.
And they also can, so if we can make some movement here happen, we can probably get the Cloudflare account transferred into their name and then get the credentials just as a shared credential, which might be the best way to push forward on that. I think I actually even linked that issue to them on their they had a meeting that I went to earlier this week that was on their infrastructure. So what types of infrastructure they think they want to give to people. And I mentioned, the Cloudflare thing. I said, hey, we have this account that we've never been able to get a hold of. It'd be great if, and maybe even if they had a shared Cloudflare that we all use, or I don't know, whatever. But I brought that up. So
cool. Yeah. Cause yep. Yeah, I'm happy wherever it moves to. Because I don't remember if it ever moved into Node.js's Cloudflare or not. I know that the Node.js did get the domain, so that one's fine. But it's just
I'm pretty sure that the last comment on the issue says that the Cloudflare didn't, and then somebody says, "Oh, hey, maybe so and so," but then it never followed up. The thing is too, they can pay, so they'll pay for some of this stuff too. So they'll and I know we were not using a account that needs to be paid for on Cloudflare, but if we did need to, that's the kind of stuff that they're able to help with. So
right. And because I know someone in there owns the domain, I'm sure we could figure out some way to get it moved somewhere, even if we can't contact whoever has the Cloudflare account. Even if that means, temporarily we'll just have to not use Cloudflare or something, which, since it's only the GitHub pages and GitHub pages has SSL now, we can just point it there while they figure something out. You know what I mean? So, we have a bunch of different options.
Oh, also they'll purchase and maintain the payment stuff on the SSL cert. So I assume you're doing that?
No. So that's part of the Cloudflare, and I believe it's just free with the Cloudflare or something. I don't know the details of it.
Okay. Well, then maybe that's not something we need,
but yes.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say. So yeah. So that. Yeah, if you can bring that kind of stuff up with them, then that'd be awesome, because that's definitely been a story, because as soon as we can get that nailed down and get access to it, we can then do stuff like change it to say redirect all HTTP to HTTPS. For right now it's doing dual, and so and probably maybe the status board thing at some point where we can have it doing both, if it's on the Cloudflare or whatever or something, so that way we can figure it out. But yeah.
Cool. Sweet. And so my last thing was, I don't know if I mentioned, but I got a talk accepted for Node.js Interactive in Montreal, talking about Express.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna. I actually watched your video from the previous one where you were the keynote, thinking okay, I should try to find something that's the future, that is covering different things than he covered. Anyway, so basically the idea is I'm going to present I'm going to talk about where we're at generally, but then I'm also going to talk about specifically how new people can start contributing. So that's one of the reasons why I've been building this board, was so that for the talk I can show it and say, look, go here, go to this page, here's a list of issues, help us, and talk through what things we think are important and how they can triage. And like it's basically going to be a recruiting contributors sort of talk, but through the lens more of like my story joining the project. So I'm going to try to have at least like a little bit of like, look, it might sound intimidating to join, but like, it's not that hard. Just start contributing a little bit, pick off some of these issues. And if you find that you really like it and you want to get involved, you can take up the more complicated ones. Then, and then at some point you'll start going to the TC meetings, and just hopefully try to, inspire people by saying, look, I didn't start by contributing code really. I started by like just being on the repo, listening to it.
Right. I mean, I think I've said that to people too. I mean, that's basically, I think that was like really how I started too. Like just being active in the repo. Sure, I probably had like a pull request here and there or whatever, but I mean, a big part of it is being active on there, right? So it's like participating in the discussions, having like, say, even just opinions on the different things, and helping, move it forward per se, because as you see, like there's certainly code and stuff like that, but it's not like purely code. And I think like part of really in the end, if you look at a project as being purely code contributions, you do end up like just churning through a lot of different code and APIs, just because, I mean, what else can you really do at some point? And as you see here, like we certainly have a bunch of big things code wise anyway still. But yeah, and yeah, I don't know if you were thinking of mentioning even just like, the package management working group or anything like that as well, but so
yeah, the talk was I will probably touch on that a little bit. Some of the people from that group are also giving a panel talk, I think.
Gotcha.
Or maybe not a panel talk, but what one of the other formats that they do. So I might lightly touch on it, but I think the main focus will be specifically on because one of the other things that I think people don't know is the breadth of packages that is maintained by effectively you, but like the Express community, right? So like I don't think people realize that React Router was using path to regex, which is an Express package, right? So like I don't think they realize that like stuff like that, where there's a lot of the packages that we use that are in these other ecosystems that it's not quite obvious, right? And so I've sort of plumbed some of the like dependency graphs looking at these. And so I'm going to point out some of those and say, look, you might not necessarily be super into the Express server, but maybe you really are into performance on, the JSON parsing front, and you want to go look at ways to improve body parser so that it's faster. Like, we have all these opportunities for people to take, things that aren't necessarily the big picture framework stuff and go with it. Like you say you have a lot of expertise in the MIME type definitions and parsing, and you want to make some improvements there. Like we just have a lot of different areas of code that thinking about Express you might not realize, and so contributing to those different areas, it could be a way for people to think about getting involved that's not necessarily like obvious when they think about Express,
Yep. Because I think like the Webpack dev, I think.
Oh, exactly. Yeah,
there was something
that was actually one of the ones that I wanted to bring up too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There was something that was another big thing that like switched to using the send package to serve files under the hood. I don't remember which thing that was. Let me see if it just shows up on the npm.
So I was using, I don't have the link up, but I have the link somewhere, I think on my personal computer. I'm on my work computer right now. That is it's like a dependency graph viewer thing. So like you give it an npm package and it just goes through and finds all the people who depend on you and you depend on, I think, and builds up like the whole graph of it. So it's a nice way to kind of look through and see, packages you might recognize and see the connections.
Well, it was with serve. So there's that generic like module called serve.
Oh, yeah. I was using that the other day, actually. It's the first time I'd used it. Worked pretty well.
Yep. And under the hood, it uses the send module, which is also basically
Yep.
part of the Express ecosystem. So
Yeah, definitely. That's it. That's exactly the kind of thing that I'm thinking of.
oh, and you see, I just looked at its dependencies, which I knew it wasn't a direct dependent on, but it apparently has a direct dependency on compression.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Serve handler is what depends on send.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that's sort of the meat of that package. I think the serve package is mostly just the CLI around it, right?
Right. But yeah, so I mean, yeah, stuff in there, and I'm sure you can look around, but like, yeah, I'm sure there are a bunch of stuff that you know.
Yep. Yeah, so
I
I was
think
gonna pick out at least a few key examples where I thought it would really appeal to a broader audience of like, yeah, you might not be building Express apps, but here's how you can contribute to, Webpack via Express, right? It's like Webpack uses it to do dev server. If those kind of examples where it sort of connects the dots for people that maybe would have been on the fringe and said, oh, I don't contribute to Express. I don't use Express. I'm a front end developer. It's like, well, you do, you know? Um, so.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Anyway, so I'll be there, and I'll also be there for the Node Contributor Summit. So if there's anything that we have like that you want to bring up, if I don't know if you're available to go to it or not, but if you're not, I can, and you have anything you want me to talk to people about, I can.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't think I am. When is that thing again?
So it's early December. It's December like 11th, I think. And then the Contributor Summit's like right after. So I think that's the 13th and 14th, maybe.
Gotcha. So I technically am available. I can always see if I can figure out a way to get there. That would be.
The OpenJS Foundation also has travel funding, so you can apply for that.
Yeah. Well, so usually they want you to obviously probably usually like get your work to sponsor you. So obviously, which makes sense.
That too. Yep.
So I'll try to poke them and see what they say. It's always kind of like a hit and miss there. Sometimes the employer will be like, oh, right now we're kind of like closed for letting you do them, period. And it's all kind of like random. Sometimes I feel like, at least my employer. So
yeah. I haven't asked. I posted, and we have a Slack group that's like, hey, conference discussions, and it was sort of like, well, is it anything to do with Netflix? And I'm like, no, definitely not. So I'm like, well, use your best judgment. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll, we'll see. But
alrighty,
cool.
Well,
that's all I got.
All right. So that will end our meeting for today. We'll have one. Our next one will be September 11th. Is that right? That's the Wednesday.
I think so, yeah.
So, yep, September 11th, and then we'll be doing it again through the Zoom from going forward. And everything, we were live streaming on YouTube again, unlike last week. So we will continue to be able to do that now. All righty.